On January 1st, the price of one Bitcoin was $44,168. And as of right now, it's $71,368 per coin. That's a 60% increase in just over 2 months. So why is the price going up so fast? How can you take advantage of this? And what happens next? Well, let's answer all those questions and jump into it. And the first thing we'll dig into is the price of Bitcoin, which, an hour before I was recording this and going live, it was over 70, but now we're just under 70,000. But as you can see by the 1 week chart here, it's all gravy. We are up and to the right. It just gets more and more bullish the longer you zoom out. The 1 year chart is just amazing. So this is where we currently are. Bitcoin is a $1.37 trillion asset, has massive amounts of daily volume right now, trading volume, and it is pretty dang close to $70,000 still. We are fully entrenched in new all-time high territory. 3 hours ago, $72,700, brand new all-time high was set. And if you got in 10 years ago, you're up 102,000%. So way to go, OG hodler. What's crazy is we've actually hit all-time highs basically all around the world, which is super cool to see. USD was the holdout for a while, but now we've officially surpassed all-time high in USD as well. Fully in uncharted territory, fully in never before seen price discovery. Very, very exciting. And this is all leading up to an event, which I'm sure you're all quite familiar with, which is the Bitcoin halving, which is coming up in 38 days, which means the amount of rewards put out every day to miners, the amount of new Bitcoin created will be cut in half. Right now it's at 900. It's soon going to be 450 Bitcoins per day. And if we zoom out on the chart here, the last Bitcoin halving was May 11th, 2020, 4 years ago. It happens roughly every 4 years. And you can see that just before that happened, a couple days before, the price was $9,959 per Bitcoin. So just as the halving was happening, there was a dip, which we can zoom out here and see that dip was recovered from pretty quick. But that dip was just under 14%, 13.6% dip. So, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that in 38 days, again, that's when the Bitcoin halving is going to happen, roughly. It's a moving target. It could be actually 39 or 42, or it could be 36. It's ever shifting because the blocks aren't perfectly every 10 minutes. They're just on average every 10 minutes. I think either before the halving or just after, I think it's reasonable to expect we have some sort of a correction, because everybody speculates based on these big events in the Bitcoin universe. And there is certainly a lot of hype, a lot of expectation. A lot of people saying the price is, it's already priced in. A lot of people saying it's a sell the news event. And I'm sure in micro terms, short terms, it certainly will be a sell the news event. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a 10%, a 20%, 25% correction within a week or two of the halving, or within a month of the halving. But again, if we look at this chart, this is 6 months after the halving. So halving happens, $8,604 Bitcoin. 6 months later, $15,686 Bitcoin. So 6 months after the halving in the previous cycle, again, it doesn't mean it's going to repeat perfectly, but just some things to look at and judge this by. We went from $8,600 to almost $16,000 Bitcoin, which was an 82% increase in price in 6 months. So if we look at that today, we're back over 70. I love it. So that is a $57,000 increase. So $120,000 Bitcoin, potentially, if it were to do another 82% increase after the halving. But of course, it depends on what the price is around halving. But, moving up $57,000 in 6 months after the halving is wild. Again, this is just guesstimation. This is just based on the previous cycle. Every cycle is a little bit different. We've also never been at new all-time high prices right before a halving. New all-time highs have always come after a halving. So again, very much uncharted territory, which is very exciting. So now we've kind of talked about the current price action. We've talked about the halving coming up. I think it's important to talk about what has been fueling this. Why are we in this uncharted territory? Why have we gone from 40-something thousand dollars to over $70,000 in only 2 months this year before the halving event? Well, the answer should be obvious, but amongst other things, it's the ETFs. The ETFs, the Bitcoin spot ETFs, which if you don't know what those are, they're basically giving the ability to anybody with a brokerage that supports these ETFs to buy into Bitcoin through a just normal stock vehicle, an ETF, an exchange traded fund. So you buy IBIT or FBTC or some of my favorites, HODL or BRR. I like the HODL, the Van Eck one a lot. HODL. You buy any of those and it gives you spot price, current market price exposure to Bitcoin. And again, we've had these for 2 months now. January 10th is when they got approved. And in that time, BlackRock has bought 203,000 Bitcoins to satisfy the demand of the ETFs. Because when they sell these ETFs, they actually have to back it up with Bitcoin. So they have to own the Bitcoin that they're selling, which I think is a very interesting aspect of this. And I think it's great that that's how these were built and written. Fidelity has bought 127,000. So in total, across all of these, and Grayscale is one that's not really super fair to include because they've been around longer. Theirs was just converted over to an ETF, but this is almost 500,000 Bitcoin across all of these, which is insanity. And this has all happened in, again, 2 months. So there's this insane demand, and this is not retail demand. I mean, a little bit of it is, but mostly this is established traders and companies and funds and stuff. There is retail mixed in there, but not retail in the sense that we've seen in previous bull runs where people are manically jumping into the market. That hasn't happened yet, and we've already seen these levels. To give you more perspective, let me break this down to you, which by the way, several of these charts are coming from HODL 15 Capital. I follow them on Twitter, great resource, tons of data. Big fan of this account. This is the past 9 weeks. We just finished week 10 last week, so I haven't seen that data yet. But the past 9 weeks, this is what it's looked like. Thousands and thousands of Bitcoin. There has been some GBTC sell-offs and stuff too, as people transition to these other ones. But like week 6, 44,000 Bitcoin purchased just in week 6. And let me put this in further perspective. Remember I said right now, before the halving happens, there's 900 Bitcoin newly created per day by miners. Across these 9 weeks, that means there's been roughly 56,000 Bitcoin, brand new Bitcoin created on the market. Almost all that new Bitcoin that was hit in the market was essentially bought up in week 6. Looking at these crazy numbers, we have far exceeded new Bitcoin hitting the market, which means, you know, obviously every new Bitcoin that hits the market isn't being sold to them. I'm just giving an example of new issuance. This is being bought over the counter and from individuals and from companies and whatever. Like my mine Bitcoin, I have not sold to BlackRock and have no plans to, but I'm just illustrating that the new Bitcoin flowing in doesn't even close to meet this demand. And also numbers of Bitcoin on exchanges is not crazy high. So there's a real limited supply of Bitcoin available to purchase. And it's going to get even worse once the halving happens because there's going to be even less new Bitcoin to go around. There's going to be certainly supply shock happening. Here's an example from week 9, not last week, but the week before. 33,614 Bitcoins were purchased across all of the 9 or 10 ETFs, and only 6,300 new Bitcoins were created. So that's wild. And then let's look at just BlackRock's, because it's crazy just to see these numbers. The red line you see here, that is how much Bitcoin is created every day. And then the blue bars are how much Bitcoin BlackRock has been purchasing every day. And so every single day since this chart has started, they've been purchasing just BlackRock. And mind you, again, this is only one of these investment companies, funds that has started an ETF, has exceeded the new issuance every single day over the past 41 days. So that is absolutely insanity. And there's several other narratives happening around Bitcoin I will get into as to why this is happening, but this is certainly one of the big catalysts to what we're seeing right now. The next thing I want to highlight is with this growth, there's been some exciting news, which is that Bitcoin has surpassed silver to become the 8th largest asset in the world. Here are the top assets in the world. Now, and I'll tell you why this isn't a fair chart, but let me just show it to you for illustrative purposes. Silver has a market cap of 1.373 trillion. Bitcoin is at 1.413 trillion right now. So now it is the 8th largest. It's already passed up Meta. It's passed up Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway. TSMC passed up a lot of massive companies or investment companies. It's getting closer and closer to passing up Alphabet. And I think this is an important milestone because silver is something that has been used for thousands of years as a means of currency in various variations. And now Bitcoin has surpassed this thing that has been this lasting legacy of currency and rare metal. Obviously, the goal is here. It's gold. Get at least as big as gold. Bitcoin, in my estimation, is a better gold. It's a digital gold. This is why I've invested so heavily in it. And I think this is the target, $14.556 trillion market cap. If Bitcoin were to hit that market capitalization with the current number of outstanding shares, or in this case, coins in circulation of 19.6 million, that means one single Bitcoin would be worth $740,000 per coin, which is wild stuff. Now, do I think that's gonna happen this cycle? No. But I do think that that might happen in the next 5 years. Certainly within the next 10 years it's possible if things keep going the way they're going and people see Bitcoin as an alternative to gold. But I think the important thing to show here is that this is purely assets and mostly companies. This doesn't include a lot of things. Like doesn't include the entire S&P 500 index, or this doesn't encompass entire economies, or this does not encompass what would happen if Bitcoin were to become a world reserve currency or asset and we were to settle things in Bitcoin. This is not perfect, but at least it shows you where we could go from here. Because gold isn't, it's not only $14 trillion out there that you can Bitcoin can gobble up. There's many multiples of that out there that it could gobble up. So why will Bitcoin become a more attractive thing to invest in than silver or gold for people? Why will more people buy into this? Why will the ETF seem more attractive? Well, that's happening because this is the dollar. Here in the US, if you go back to the early 1900s and look at the purchasing power of the US dollar, it has only fallen off of a cliff. It started when we first removed the backing of gold, made that backing fractional. It got worse when that fractionality was removed altogether and it was completely disconnected from gold, and it became true fiat currency that could be printed whenever they want. And since then, it has only gone down and downhill. So this is actually a really interesting tweet I wanted to read because I thought this was so perfect for this. If you don't know, Safety, he is the author of The Bitcoin Standard, which I have sitting on my shelf over there. Great Bitcoin book. But he said, life is not supposed to have such easy shortcuts. This only seems spectacularly easy because we spent a century using money that's optimized for government criminals to rob you and getting gaslit into believing life just has to get more expensive and saving is futile. You must keep working harder forever and become part of a part-time hedge fund manager just to keep the wealth you've already earned from work. If it wasn't for fiat larceny, everything would be always getting cheaper and savings would be an effective way to provide for your future. It isn't that Bitcoin is too good to be true. It's just that it kills fiat parasitism, and that it is the world's biggest problem. And he breaks it down even better, I think. It's more succinctly here. It says, you save all the income you don't spend in Bitcoin and then wait 5 years at least, everything magically becomes a lot cheaper. And there's one more of his that I think is worth reading. This talks about people calling Bitcoin a cult or whatever, but he says 99% of USD cult members have no idea what the pictures and writing on their shitcoin means, let alone understand how their shitcoin works. These same people are told to think that Bitcoiners who use open source software that anyone can audit are a cult. So what is all the things I'm trying to say here? Let me highlight it with this one thing. Wages over time are going up. That's undeniable. But inflation and the expense of things is going up at a higher rate. And we've been led to believe that if we save our dollars, if we save our money, that we can, if we work hard enough, we can have all the things we want, we can buy all the things we need. And this chart shows you that that's just not possible. The purchasing power of pretty much every fiat currency is only dropped over time as you print more. If you have more of it, it becomes less valuable. So I think that these ideas are finally starting to permeate the greater cultural consciousness, at least in the US, and I'm sure in lots of third world countries where their dollars have been hyperinflated, have completely collapsed, that people are finally they're losing a bit of faith in these currencies and trying to find alternatives. Now, obviously, there's been alternatives for a long time. You can just invest your money, you can invest in index funds and other things. But I think a lot of people are becoming disenchanted with the economy and businesses and investing in general, and are looking for something else that's an alternative. And I think Bitcoin is one of those things that will look more and more attractive to people going forward. And with all these ETFs that are, being purchased up, and with this momentum, I think that only raises more and more awareness of what Bitcoin is and puts it in the front of more people. And that in turn, you see this thing going up, and you see the value of it going up, and you see people protecting their wealth effectively with it. And you have to ask yourself, why am I holding on to this dollar or this currency or whatever? So I think that's kind of more of a macro outlook. That's a next, several years kind of an outlook for fiat and Bitcoin. But I think that's something that's going to 100% drive the narrative along the normal. I want to make lots of money. I want to get rich quick. I want to speculate. Everyone's getting rich. I want to get rich with them. Absolutely going to be a part of it. But I think there's going to be this undercurrent kind of going forward. We're seeing, they just announced the inflation numbers for last month, and it's 3.2%. It was higher than expected. We're just seeing these numbers, and we're just seeing the money inflated, and we're seeing it lose value. And you go to the grocery store and everything costs more than before, but you're not making that much more. And people, I think, will get fed up with it, and they'll want an alternative. And so I think that's a definite narrative to look for. That's a lot of the why and a lot of my thoughts on what's driving this momentum at the moment. But what can you do about it? How can you take advantage? Well, you can buy Bitcoin. That's probably the easiest way to take advantage of this. You can just buy and hold, which is what I've been doing for almost 7 years now, buying regularly and hanging on to it. And even through the giant dips, bear markets and stuff, I still have way more wealth than I did when I started. When I look at inflation, I have far outpaced inflation. Bitcoin has been an incredible hedge against inflation. It's also beat things like the S&P 500, which I still advocate for and I still see a lot of purpose in, but personally I have steered away from that and gone this direction. So that's obviously one thing. Another thing you can do is you can mine Bitcoin. This is one of the last opportunities I want to talk about as far as taking advantage of what's happening right now, because this is something I'm about to do again. If you've watched my channel, I've put a lot of money into mining. Well, this week I'm going to buy 5 more of these S21s, which if we look at the S21 right now, 200 terahash, 3,500 watts, 8 cents per kilowatt hour, at least at where I host them at Musk Miners. $59.50 is the cost, and that will bring you 0.09 BTC a month, or $672 a month. You'll pay $201 in hosting plus electricity, and you will profit $470 per machine. I'm going to get 5 of these. I'm going to buy a terahash. So I will be profiting about $2,400 per month with my 5 machines. So why am I telling you about this? Well, if you watch my channel, I love mining. So there's just the passive stacking aspect here. Well, this break-even time is wrong. I didn't 5x the cost, which you have to do, but that's irrelevant. Because I think you'll break even a lot faster than 3. Even 1 year, though, is pretty dang good, but I think you'll break even faster. But why am I telling you about this? Well, one, I love mining. I am a huge fan of these machines and doing this whole thing as a fun exercise, but it's also made me a lot of money. But I think there's 2 important things that I haven't, one of which I've talked about on my channel quite a bit, but the other one I need to talk more about because I think it's just as, if not more important. One is the element of hardware arbitrage. I'm buying these now because I think when Bitcoin is $150,000 or more per coin, I'm going to sell these for more than I bought them for. Maybe multiples. We'll see how that goes. I can mine on it for the next 6 to 9 months. When the market's at its craziest, I can sell my machines for a huge profit, and I keep all the Bitcoin I mined along the way. Love that idea. But 2, when I come back to these charts and I see how much these ETFs are purchasing, I see how much momentum Bitcoin has right now, and I don't really believe we've even gotten into the full-on Bitcoin pandemonium, retails coming in. I think the aspect that is being slept on with mining is this, the block reward. The block reward is not 6.37 BTC per block. it's 6.25. The extra little bit there, the extra 0.12 BTC is transaction fees. In the past, when Bitcoin has gotten busy with like ordinals and stuff, I've seen this block reward be as high as 8 or almost 9 BTC per block because there's so many transaction fees going on. I think if things get as crazy as they potentially could over the next year, if we go to a $5 trillion or $10 trillion market cap for all of crypto, the block rewards could be double, triple, 5x what they are today, or what they will be after the halving. So after the halving, this is going to drop to 3.125, but I think we could easily see 6 or 9 or 12 BTC per block if things get so crazy. So that's what's interesting about being a miner that you don't get with just being a holder of Bitcoin, is you have this extra variable that's totally unpredictable, could totally not go the way I think it will. But if things get so crazy, these block rewards could be massive, and you could potentially profit more Bitcoin per month than we currently do, even though the halving hasn't happened yet. We could potentially make more Bitcoin after the halving. Again, we have to see how this theory of mine actually plays out in real life when actual demand hits these markets and what really truly happens with Bitcoin's price in the future. But I think it's a really interesting exercise to think about. One last thing I wanted to cover is this. I've seen this a lot, and I think I've question marks about it. I think it's varying degrees of accuracy here, and I don't know if we'll see this time around, but this is how previous cycles have looked like going from Bitcoin bull run into an alt season. And I think this is important to understand. So right now we're in the Bitcoin phase, obviously. Lots of money flowing into Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to hit more and more all-time highs. It's going to climb higher and higher. And at some point, people are going to go, okay, that was fun, and they're going to move their money out of Bitcoin. And when that happens, it starts going to Ethereum. It starts going into other altcoins, but eventually it continues flowing into all the smaller coins, the mid caps, the low caps, the micro caps, and that's when we see the alt season. So some people I've talked to, what their plan is they plan to ride the Bitcoin bull run on the way up. They plan to sell some or all their Bitcoin where they think is the top, which good luck to you if you're going to pick it exactly on time. Then they roll those funds over into strategic altcoin positions, and they ride all that up, and then they exit that. Me personally, I'm probably not going to touch in my Bitcoin, but I am going to ride all of these alt cycles for sure. But this is kind of an interesting way to look at it, to know where the money flows. It doesn't all happen at one time, at least it hasn't in the past. It usually happens in their own little mini cycles. So understanding the flow of money within the crypto cycle at large is a fairly important thing if you want to make money in this space. So I just want to cover that. And look at that, back over 71,000, or maybe it's back below. Yep, over 71,000. Okay, cool. So that was a lot to digest. But the last thing I want to leave you with, if you've sat with me through that whole thing, is I think it's incredibly important, if you haven't been like truly paying attention to all this stuff, if you haven't been watching these numbers, if you haven't been watching these inflows, now's the time to like start paying attention. I think the next 6 to 18 months are going to be very exciting. And I would hate it if you're watching this and you're sitting on the sidelines and you're going to miss out on all this. Because one, there's a lot to be made money-wise, but two, it's just going to be fairly important for the entire industry of crypto altogether. And if you are interested in mining Bitcoin, you should really watch this video where I go in depth, into detail about all of my experiences over the past 1.5 to 2 years of mining Bitcoin. Goodbye.